called selective listening as the cocktail party phenomenon. For example, when we are in a party and there are many sounds going on, there's a music, there's a talk that we have with our friend, and there's another group which is standing next to us and they're also talking, and their sound is coming to our ears. But then we have selective listening. We are listening to our friend. I'm listening to my friend who's talking to me, but I'm not interested in my friend's speech. My ear is maybe listening to the music that is playing on, or my ear is some maybe listening to the other group that is talking about a certain political thing that had happened and that interests me. So this is selective listening. And the selective listening occurs with our brain. This is cocktail party phenomenon, but this is something that happens all the time when we listen, when we hear things. And that is the reason why meaning becomes important when you talk about listening process. As I remember Karamjeet sir said in his final parting notes that using meaningful things, something from daily lives of students would be helpful when you talk of listening activities or skills. So this is why it becomes important that whatever you are doing, whatever listening activity that you're conducting with them, please ensure that the meaning is related to the students, that these words that they're listening to have some kind of meaning to them. If they don't know the meanings, or if it doesn't actually matter to them, it is not from their daily lives, or it is not something that they would know. That is why we talked about authentic text, authentic material. If it is something which does not actually hold meaning to them, they will selectively listen and then ignore the other sounds. And this is what happens when we don't have something which is related to our students. As we say that, we find that our students are actually not very good at speaking. I'll just be touching upon the speaking part because listening is actually related a lot to speaking. And how is it related? We'll talk about it through this. So this is pattern. I've taken this pattern from the Cambridge Encyclopedia of Language from David Crystal. It is a very famous or popular book for all language learners. So this is how the listening process goes according to him. The sound enters through the ears. We'll go by A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, and then I. So the first part of listening is in the listening process is the ears. We talked about that the ears process the sounds that we listen to, that are that are detected, the sounds that are detected, and then a primary auditory analysis is done while moving ahead from cochlea, which is the inner ear. This is the primary auditory analysis of the sounds on the first level is done over there. And then we move to the C part, which is auditory patterns. Then we move on to the brain, where the auditory patterns are detected. What kind of patterns are there? And I'm sure you would have noticed that there are different patterns for every language. And this is where the function of brain comes in. This is why we sometimes hear certain things in a language and we are unable to hear certain things in our language. And then comes the sensory side, the part D, which is which breaks down our language that we have heard into phonemes, syllables, words, and so on. This is the sensory side, the one that we receive. And then it becomes a received message in our brain. This is all the processes which are going on in our organism. Now, this becomes a received message. Until this part, it is the listening process. But it is a cyclical process. This is not just related to only listening. Now, the same brain processes it into a transmitted message. When you've heard it, when I said that you need to give students time to think about it, to process the information. This is what I mean. When you allow the students to listen, to process, this is what happens in their brains. And it takes time to form the phonemes, the syllable, the words, and then finally get the received message. So it moves to the transmitted message. The message is now to be transmitted. Now the speaking part starts. And then the same thing, something which has been processed in our brains through the years as phonemes, syllables, and words, it moves out of our system now. We have received it. Now we are producing it. Now, this is the productive skill, speaking. I would not delve into much. It's just that since the both of our both speaking and listening are related, I'm just mentioning it over here. So the same thing happens, except that this is a motor skill now. This is not sensory. We are producing it, and then the same subphonemic matter things goes into it. The motor patterns, distinct patterns happen, and then speech organs. The way primary auditory analysis was done in our ears, the speech organs, which are vocal cords, they start working. And then after they start working only when they receive stimulus or process stimulus of motor patterns, the patterns that have been developed, patterns of different phonemes, different sounds, different syllables and words, they have been developed in our brains. And then this goes to our vocal cords. Our brain senses, makes the pattern, and then gives it to our vocal cords. And then the speech organs gives it out of our mouth at the eye level. So it is a big process which happens. It is only when the ears receive the sound and then they process it into phonemes, syllables, and words that the same can be produced. If there is some kind of problem or disturbance at the level of B and C and D, then the speech at the level of F, G, and H would be disturbed. So that is why we listen to so many different sounds and so many different problems or defects in our speech patterns. So it is really important that we uh, give more emphasis to listening so that we have another productive skill, because we always see talk about students from our classes, students from our schools not being able to speak English. They're not able to speak English because they have not been able to listen to English. And the process of listening is a complex process. And as I said initially in the session, unfortunately, this is not given much time. So as teachers, I think it's time we give it's a due weightage, it's due share, and give a lot of time to listening. Thank you so much. This PPT that I shared with you was developed by a friend of mine, Kamaini Joshi, and with a few modifications that I did in the PPT and some additions that I did. Um, so this is the end of the first part. I'm sorry I had to take a few more minutes with this. Um, I hope I can start right away with the second part. Okay. For this, we are doing the practical part. So I'll give you a minute. You go and grab a pen and a paper. We'll do an activity. I'm waiting by my watch. It's 14 minutes past 1. By 15 minutes past 1, I'll be starting with the activity. Just grab a paper and a pen. Any paper, any pen would do. I'm just waiting for a minute. So I think it's time. I hope all of you have got your papers and your pens. Now, this is a listening activity. All of you have a paper and a pen. Draw a big circle on the paper. Draw a big circle on the paper. Draw another smaller circle at the top of this big circle. A smaller circle on the top of this big circle. Draw a smaller circle on top of this big circle. Now draw two very small circles inside this big circle. Small circle. Draw two very small circles inside this smaller circle. Draw two very small circles inside this smaller circle. Draw one small straight line between these two tiny circles that you've drawn. Draw one small straight line between these two tiny circles that you've drawn. Now draw two triangles, very small triangles on the right and left side of the smaller circle. Two very small triangles on the right and left of the smaller circle. Now come to the bottom of the bigger circle. Come to the bottom of the bigger circle and draw two oval-shaped circles, oval shapes at right and left of the bigger circle. Bottom of the bigger circle, draw two oval shapes to the right and left of the bigger circle. Now look at your figure and take half minute processing the changes that you want to do. Look at your figure and see what you've drawn. We'll have about 20 more. Okay, Meenu, you've given it out. So, would you like to show your drawings? If you can, open up your cameras and show it. Okay, I'll show what it looks like. Okay, so this was one listening activity. The students were listening, they were detecting sounds, they were making meaning of it. Yeah, that's right. Thank you, Madhuri. Thank you, Madhuri, for sharing your cat with us. Now, as you would see, this activity has the students detecting the sounds. They make meaning out of it. This is related to their daily lives, and they are actively participating. They're actively working in the process of listening. This is not testing their memory. This is not testing their comprehension of the text, but actually of listening, yes. Now, moving around in the city as we talk to the map. Now, you are here with a smiley. This is one thing that you could give your students as a handout. Are you all ready? So, what we would do is you would follow as, thank you, Jyoti. So, you would all follow with your pencils. Now, enter the city, move to your left, keep moving to your left, leave the first right, keep moving. You'll see a water part on your right, keep moving. Now turn right, keep moving straight. Now again turn right, and after leaving two buildings, stop and tell me what is at your left.
Market.
Now, thank you. So the student was actively listening, actively making note of what he or she was doing, and this is also a part of, thank you, Neetu, market, that's right. So this is how you could go about having the use of map. Now you can make your map more complex, or you can have some other things in your map related to your locality, the school, the area that the students live in. But this is how a handout would work. This is again a listening activity. Okay, was I fluent when I was speaking?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, if yes, you would know why. Why was I fluent? Because I was listening, because you were able to listen to me as I was speaking, and you were also reading, and you were also writing in both these activities. So, fluency, as we say in a language, is a part of all these skills. You cannot be fluent in just speaking, you cannot be fluent in just writing, you cannot be fluent in just reading. It has to be all four together. Now, as we discussed, listening and reading are receptive skills, and speaking and writing are productive skills. And as we also saw in the diagram, when the input is listening, the output is speaking. And when the input is reading, the output is writing. That is how the four skills go. So, in case you want to have your students speaking a good English in a good manner, You must give a good listening to the student. In case you want your student to write well, you must give a good input of reading to your students. So these are language learning parts. The basics are pronunciation, vocabulary, grammar, and practice. And the skills involved are listening, speaking, reading, and writing. We all know that. And the success is based on motivation, the time, the quality, and practice again. So we'll come to the basics. Pronunciation is the first. It is not phonetic. The pronunciation in English is not phonetic. So it is easy to learn new words. And the listening part goes with it. When you have to have pronunciation, you have to have good listening. Just remember how you learned your own language, your own mother tongue. You did not have any classes for that. You started speaking only after you listened to it for a long time. So give your students a lot of listening time as much as you can. And remember, your students have to have motivation, more than motivation, more success, and faster your students learn. And then you have to have good vocabulary, keep introducing new words to your students, but don't flood them with a lot of words. Don't give them many words to learn. Just be patient, be slow, gradual introduction of words, maybe one word in a day, maybe two words in a day, depending upon the level of your learners. Don't flood them with words. And if you think there are many new words in the lesson that you are delivering to them, just focus or identify by yourself some words, a few words each day, so that your students don't get overwhelmed with new words and then they keep learning vocabulary with the pace that they have to. I'll move on next because we don't have much time. I would want you to think a lot about this hearing and listening. So, listening is active, as you all rightly perceived in the earlier part of the session. Hearing is only perceiving sounds, but listening is understanding the information which is heard and involvement with mind and body. As you'd have seen in these two activities that we did, this is understanding the information after hearing it and then involvement of mind and body. Hearing is a passive process, but listening is an active process, as many of you pointed out it in the earlier part of the session. Hearing is effortless activity. Listening requires conscious efforts, concentration, and interest. So you must practice active listening with your students. And I'm sure you would have know by now what active listening is. We've been doing active listening right from the beginning of this session. Now, talking about difference between hearing and listening, we are just talking about the verbal meanings of the word. So to hear means to receive or become conscious of a sound using your ears. Just getting conscious of the sound. For example, she heard a noise outside. My grandmother is getting old and can't hear very well. But listen is to give attention to someone or something in order to hear to them. As many of you pointed it out very rightly in the session, you have to give attention while listening. So, to give attention to someone in order to hear them. I listen to music while I have breakfast. You haven't listened to a word I've just said. I'm sure that would not be a case. Okay. Listening occurs in your ears? Does it? We have talked about it. Does it occur in your ears? Would anybody like to answer it? I gave you the
Ma'am, listening does not occur in our ears only, it occurs in our brain also.
thank you, Jyoti ma'am. So, when we talk about hearing, it occurs in our ears, but the process of listening, as we talked, as we also saw in the diagram that I shared with you, it is a process which involves processing of the information that we hear, and it uses our minds for that. It is a whole body listening. Remember, when we talked of listening, we said it's a reaction, um, reflects to the sounds that we are hearing. So it is a whole body listening as well. As you would see, we have our eyes involved in listening, we have ears involved in listening, we have mouth, so that we don't talk while we are listening. This is something that you could share with your students in the class. Hands, when you listen, please keep your hands unoccupied, feet quiet on the floor, body facing the speaker so that you can receive all those sounds, and then brain is thinking about what you said. Here, the heart cares about what the other is saying. Now, there are four types of listening usually said: informational, which is about perceiving only the information, no criticism, no judgment, just focusing on key points. Then there is critical listening, which requires understanding, looking for evidence, looking for ideas that are there, and then logical reasoning. We also have appreciative listening, which is listening only for entertainment and does not involve any kind of analyzing, but we are listening. Remember, we are not hearing. As we said, we're listening to music. It is a whole body involvement. And then there's empathetic listening as well, which focuses on speakers' emotions. When you are empathetic, you have uh, an involvement with the person who's speaking, and you're actually listening to the emotions. And then the listener, it also allows the listener to see another point of view. You get empathetic, you get involved with the other person. These are some skills and techniques that could be used for active listening. I know, Sarika ma'am, we are 3 minutes above the time. I'll just try and finish it off in a few minutes, a minute or two. So these are six active listening skills: paying attention, holding the judgment, not judging while listening, then reflecting, clarifying things, summarizing, sharing. So I'll be sharing the PPT with you so that you can delve with all these skills in a more time. So there are few tips for your listening, for devising listening skills with your students. Short and simple. Model the activity, please. Don't just start with the activity, give them some example, give them a demonstration, and then start with the activity. Keep repeating. As I remember, Naveen Singh also said, not just once, keep repeating. ICQs help, and then variety matters. Have authentic input. There's a list of authentic inputs over here. You can go through them when I share the PPT with you. These are some of the activities that you could use for listening. You do Chinese whisper. Dictation is the best method, age old and tried and tested. Listening to story and then summarizing it. Ask your students to summarize. You could also ask your students to weave a story so that one student starts with one thing, the next student follows it and keeps adding to the story. Then blind walk and then whoosh. Okay, we've talked about it. Listening comprehension or reading comprehension. Thank you. I hope you have reasons to smile, and my thank you note is another good reason to smile. Thank you so much. I hope I've finished in
Thank you,
time,
Garima.
Sarika ma'am.
It was wonderful session with you, especially when it comes to listening skills and those activities. Uh, Now, I would like to thank our participants for their patience listening and a feedback which I'm getting from you guys that it was a wonderful session. Thank you, Jyoti ma'am. Thank you, Neetu and all. Uh, one last request to all the participants is that I know there are technical glitches that you guys are in your schools and working from one or another place, but please try to follow the timings because your attendance will be prepared as per the recorded version of Cisco WebEx. It is automatically recorded. So please follow the timings. Be punctual for that. And thank you to Garima ma'am and all participants once again. We will catch you tomorrow exactly at 10 a.m. Must fill the feedback session for the session with resource person Garima Bhatnagar ma'am. I will share the PPT soon. Thank you. Thank you, Garima ma'am.
Thank you all. Thank you, Sarika ma'am. Thank you all for listening to me very patiently and participating as well. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you,
Thanks a
ma'am.
lot, ma'am.